Some might say the richest families in history share common vulnerabilities. Their daughters become targets for fortune hunters, their sons prey to gold diggers, and their wealth inevitably flows towards strangers through marriage. Indeed, Meyer Amschel Rothschild understood this threat so clearly that he devised a solution more radical than any previous dynasty had dared attempt. He would trap his descendants in a web of systematic cousin marriage that would preserve every penny within the bloodline. Yes, his 1812 testament created what economic historians would later recognize as a deliberate marriage market distortion, stripping female Rothschilds of inheritance rights and forcing them toward unions with their own uncles, cousins, and nephews. And the strategy succeeded beyond his wildest calculations, producing statistics that read like a genetics textbook's worst nightmare. 71% of Rothschild marriages between 1824 and 1877 occurred between blood relatives. Thus, in today's episode of Old Money Luxury, we uncover the matrimonial mathematics that preserved the Rothschild dynasty, where love was calculated in percentages of shared blood, and where the price of keeping billions in the family was paid by generations of cousins forced to become couples. Meyer Amschel Rothschild lay dying in 1812 with a fortune to protect and a radical plan to preserve it. His will contained provisions so shocking that historians would spend centuries debating whether they represented genius or madness. "I will and ordain that my daughters and sons-in-law and their heirs have no share in the trading business existing under the firm of Meyer Amschel Rothschild and Sons," the patriarch declared from his deathbed. This wasn't merely about excluding women. It was about creating a marriage trap that would ensnare his descendants for generations. Female family members should have no part in the management of the firm and should receive their interest in the estate subject to the management of the male members. The punishment for resistance was total disinheritance. If any of them should contest this arrangement, that they would lose their interest in the estate. This exclusion created what economic historians would later call a marriage market distortion that systematically forced Rothschild women toward their own cousins. Without inheritance rights, female Rothschilds faced an impossible choice: marry within the family or face social and economic exile. Natalie Livingston's research revealed the brutal effectiveness of this strategy. Without an inheritance, female Rothschilds had few potential marriage partners of the same religion and suitable economic and social stature. 4 fundamental principles would govern the fortune forever, each more controlling than the last. First, the eldest son of the eldest son would rule the fortune by virtue of his seniority, unless the majority of the members of the family decided otherwise. Second came the mandate that would define their destiny: the intermarriage of cousins for the purpose of preserving the family fortune intact and in the family. Third, absolute secrecy must shroud the fortune's true extent. No public inventories, no court proceedings, no published valuations. Anselm's will later echoed his grandfather's obsession with secrecy. "I forbid any legal action and any publication of the value of the inheritance." Fourth, the partnership must remain eternal, with the partners and their male descendants forever constituting and managing the firm. These weren't suggestions or preferences. They were iron laws enforced through financial strangulation. The statistics would prove their devastating effectiveness. Of 58 marriages, 29, or exactly 1/2, have been between first cousins. The family's own records would eventually reveal. The Armstrong source noted these cousin marriages were remarkable, observing that most of the children have been girls, which is what is anticipated by biological science. No copy of Meyer Amschel's will has ever been published by any historian of the family. The document that would force generations of cousins into each other's arms remained as secret as the fortune it protected. By the second generation, 15 of 22 Rothschilds had married incestuously within the family. The trap had sprung, and there would be no escape for 150 years. 19-year-old Betty von Rothschild stood before her Uncle James on July 11, 1824, in Frankfurt. The man who would become her husband was 32, established, powerful, and her father's brother. Betty had been born into a trap disguised as privilege, the daughter of Salomon Meyer von Rothschild and granddaughter of the dynasty's founder. Her Uncle James had complained to associates that, "I have no house to receive them," when competing with Parisian bankers, explicitly declaring his need for a wife to enhance his social position. Betty was the solution to his problem. Young, accomplished, and most importantly, unable to take family money outside the bloodline. The uncle-niece marriage would become the template for Rothschild unions, demonstrating how family wealth could be preserved through calculated incest. Contemporary observers recognized the strategic nature of this coupling, though few dared speak openly about its disturbing dynamics. Betty's education had prepared her for exactly this role, to marry within the family and create a salon that would advance Rothschild interests. After their Swiss honeymoon in summer 1824, Betty arrived in Paris to begin her transformation into one of Europe's most influential women. Lady Granville, wife of the British ambassador, marveled that, just out of her nursery, she did the honors of her house as if she had never done anything else. From their residence at Rue Lafitte in Paris's 9th arrondissement, Betty orchestrated at least 4 dinners weekly with between 10 and 60 guests. Politicians, painters, musicians, and royalty flocked to her salon, creating a nexus of power that amplified her husband's financial influence. She secured Frédéric Chopin as piano teacher for their children soon after his Paris arrival, beginning a relationship that would shape European culture. Her portrait commission from Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres revealed the tensions of her position. Ingres wrote in frustration to a friend in 1842, "Tuesday, I have a definite sitting with Madame de Rothschild, which came at the price of a dozen puerile and sincere letters. Long live portraits, may God damn them." Even great artists struggled with the power dynamics of serving a woman who was simultaneously patron, hostess, and product of systematic inbreeding. Regular guests included Heinrich Heine, Honoré de Balzac, and Gioacchino Rossini, intellectual giants who validated the union's social success. Betty became intimate with Queen Marie-Amélie, wife of King Louis-Philippe, leveraging her position as James's wife into royal influence. The Rothschild archive contains 10 letters from the exiled queen, 3 explicitly seeking Betty's intervention for appointments at the Rothschild Bank. For Judaism, James would say, "Refer to my wife," making Betty the guardian of tradition within their increasingly powerful household. The uncle-niece marriage produced 5 children who survived to adulthood, defying contemporary fears about consanguineous reproduction. Their daughter Charlotte would marry her cousin Nathaniel in another first-cousin union, perpetuating the cycle. James became the most powerful banker in the country and one of the richest men in the world, with Betty as his social architect. Together, they established the Hôpital Israélite de Paris in 1852, using their combined influence to create lasting institutions. Betty von Rothschild had transformed from her uncle's teenage bride into the queen of Parisian society, but the price was written in shared blood. Niall Ferguson gained unprecedented access to the Rothschild archives and discovered numbers that shocked even him. Of 21 marriages involving descendants of Mayer Amschel between 1824 and 1877, no fewer than 15 were between his direct descendants, Ferguson documented. 71.4% of Rothschild marriages during the dynasty's peak were between blood relatives. This wasn't coincidence or cultural preference. It was systematic execution of Mayer Amschel's matrimonial strategy. Ferguson emphasized that the Rothschilds pursued a strategy of endogamy, marrying not just within their own faith, but within their own immediate kinship group. His research proved what family members already knew: only a Rothschild would do for a Rothschild. The Jewish Telegraphic Agency's independent research extended the timeline and confirmed the pattern's persistence. Of 58 marriages contracted by the descendants of Mayer Amschel Rothschild up to 1905, exactly 1/2 were between first cousins, their archival analysis revealed. 50% first-cousin marriages maintained over an 85-year period represented what demographers called an extraordinary level of systematic endogamy. No other financial dynasty in history had achieved such consistent intermarriage across multiple generations. Cambridge University's anthropological study added academic validation while providing comparative context. The most common pattern was for a man to marry his father's brother's daughter, representing systematic patrilineal parallel cousin marriage. Even Europe's royal families, notorious for intermarriage, couldn't match the Rothschild achievement. The Rothschilds practiced endogamy to a degree not even the Saxe-Coburgs could match, Cambridge researchers concluded. The economic mechanism driving these numbers was brutally effective. Female Rothschilds faced mathematical certainty. Without inheritance rights, they had virtually no marriage prospects outside the family of comparable wealth and status. Time magazine's historical analysis explained how this practice ensured unity of decision-making and cooperation among the family's 5 great banking houses. The intermarriage strategy created what scholars called the world's first multinational corporation, with unified control spanning London, Paris, Frankfurt, Vienna, and Naples. By the second generation, the statistics grew even more stark. Of these 22 fellows, 15 were married incestuously, contemporary sources documented. This 68% endogamy rate in the generation immediately following the founder demonstrated immediate compliance with his testament. The pattern intensified rather than weakened over time. Nathan's 7 children provided a perfect case study. 4 married Rothschild first cousins, while the remaining 3 chose compatible Jewish banking families. His daughter Charlotte married Anselm von Rothschild of Vienna. Lionel married Charlotte von Rothschild of Naples. Nathaniel married Charlotte de Rothschild of Paris, and Louise married Meyer Karl von Rothschild of Frankfurt. Geographic distribution of these marriages revealed strategic brilliance. Each union connected different banking houses, creating family bonds that reinforced business relationships across European capitals. The numbers told a story of systematic control that transformed marriage from personal choice into corporate strategy. When Hannah Meyer dared marry outside the faith to Henry Fitzroy in 1839, she faced complete ostracism. Her exile served as a statistical warning to every Rothschild daughter contemplating escape from the mathematical certainty of cousin marriage. Nathaniel Meyer Rothschild and Emma Louise von Rothschild shared something more intimate than love. They shared both sets of grandparents. Their 1867 marriage represented genetic proximity that required generations of incest to even render possible. As double first cousins, they possessed a genetic relationship equivalent to half-siblings, yet stood before Frankfurt society on April 16th to exchange vows. Emma had originally been intended for James Edward de Rothschild, but fate and preference intervened. Sources emphasized this was a true love match, despite representing the culmination of systematic family inbreeding. The 27-year-old groom and 23-year-old bride understood exactly what their union represented, the apotheosis of Meyer Amschel's vision. Their shared ancestry created a consanguinity index that would horrify modern geneticists. They shared not only both grandparents on the maternal side, but on the paternal side too, creating unprecedented genetic overlap within a prominent European family. Yet their marriage would achieve heights of social success that seemed to mock conventional wisdom about inbreeding's consequences. Nathaniel's undergraduate friendship with the Prince of Wales at Trinity College continued throughout Edward's life. This relationship would transform Emma from a product of systematic incest into one of Britain's most celebrated hostesses. The couple lived at 6 Buckingham Palace Gate, where Emma became an integral part of the social life centered around Buckingham Palace. When the Prince of Wales became Edward VII, the Rothschilds were among his closest confidants. Emma was a noted hostess during the period of Edward's reign, frequently entertaining members of the royal family. Princess Alexandra, later Queen, became Emma's close friend, despite knowing the peculiar nature of her marriage. The double first cousins purchased Tring Park in Hertfordshire in May 1872, transforming it into a showpiece estate. Emma created comprehensive healthcare systems for estate workers, demonstrating that extreme inbreeding hadn't diminished her organizational capabilities. She possessed courage of a lion and a scientific turn of mind, characteristics that enabled her to excel in Victorian high society. Multilingual like most Rothschilds, Emma proved that shared ancestry enhanced rather than limited intellectual capacity. The genetic gamble paid off spectacularly in their children. Lionel Walter Rothschild, born 1868, became a noted naturalist, despite his parents' genetic proximity. Charlotte Evelina and Nathaniel Charles both achieved distinction in their respective fields. Their reproductive success contradicted every prediction about the dangers of such close genetic relationships. Nathaniel himself rose to unprecedented heights after marrying his double first cousin. He became senior partner of N.M. Rothschild and Sons following his father's death in 1879. Under his leadership, the bank funded Cecil Rhodes in developing the British South Africa Company and De Beers. He later administered Rhodes's estate and helped establish the Rhodes Scholarship at Oxford. Most remarkably, Nathaniel became the first Jewish peer in British history when created Baron Rothschild in 1885. The double first cousin marriage had facilitated rather than hindered the family's integration into the highest levels of British society. Their union represented the mathematical extreme of Rothschild endogamy, genetically closer than should have been possible, yet socially and financially triumphant beyond measure. History had already written the script for what happens when cousins marry cousins for generations. Just ask the Habsburgs. Charles II of Spain had died in 1700, his genome comparable to that of a child born to a brother and sister. The Spanish Habsburgs' inbreeding coefficient of 0.254 represented mathematical proof that systematic cousin marriage led to extinction. Unable to speak until age 4 or walk until 8, his deformed jaw making eating impossible, Charles embodied genetic catastrophe. A century later, the Rothschilds would embark on their own experiment with systematic inbreeding, apparently ignorant of history's warnings. Yet where Habsburgs had collapsed into drooling invalids, Rothschild cousins produced brilliant bankers, naturalists, and social leaders. The Rothschild family largely avoided these negative outcomes. Modern genetic research confirms, with scientific bewilderment. The mathematical paradox defied explanation. Similar rates of cousin marriage, radically different outcomes. Research published in PLOS I demonstrated that Habsburg inbreeding exerted an adverse effect on survival of 17.8%, plus or minus 12.3, at the first cousin level. The Rothschilds maintained comparable consanguinity levels across 150 years without genetic catastrophe. Modern analysis suggests they succeeded because those types of mutated genes simply didn't run in the family. The absence of particularly harmful recessive alleles created what geneticists call a clean genetic profile. Albert Rothschild's 1876 marriage to his second cousin Bettina produced 7 children, 6 surviving to successful adulthood. This occurred when scientific understanding predicted that first cousin marriages typically result in approximately 3.5% higher mortality rates in offspring. Yet Rothschild genealogical records showed survival rates exceeding population averages. Their children didn't merely survive, they conquered their respective fields. Albert became president of the Vienna Chess Association, pioneered photography, and managed the Austrian government's finances. He built observatories, collected art, drove the first automobile seen in Vienna, and displayed intellectual versatility that contradicted every assumption about inbreeding. Betty's Parisian salon attracted Europe's greatest minds, while she established hospitals and educational institutions. Emma, the double first cousin bride, gained intimacy with Queen Alexandra, bringing extreme consanguinity into British royalty's inner circle. Nathaniel, after marrying his genetic near twin, entered the House of Lords as Britain's first Jewish peer. These weren't exceptions. They represented the norm across generations of systematic intermarriage. Where other dynasties practicing endogamy produced monsters and madmen, Rothschilds generated genius after genius. The contrast suggested something profound about genetic destiny versus genetic probability. Population geneticists describe purging, the elimination of harmful recessive alleles through natural selection within consanguineous populations. Perhaps the Rothschilds had unknowingly achieved what the Habsburgs failed to accomplish, breeding out defects while concentrating advantages. Ferguson concluded that cousin marriages ensured that the family's capital was not dispersed, but genetics had granted an unexpected bonus. By 1905, after 58 documented marriages with exactly half between first cousins, the biological experiment had succeeded beyond Meyer Amschel's wildest dreams. The family that should have degenerated into Habsburg-style grotesques instead ruled European finance with minds sharpened rather than dulled by shared ancestry. And now, we'd like to see you in the comments. Were you aware of the Rothschilds' dark history of incest, or is this your first time hearing about it? We look forward to hearing your thoughts below. With that said, thanks for joining us for another episode of Old Money Luxury. Cheers, until the next time.